I wish that back in 2017, somebody had done a video on how to get tested for this because I was totally exhausted and couldn't figure it out. Hey everyone, it's Katie and welcome back to this channel. If you're new here, I think a lot of new people have joined the channel recently and I'm really glad that you're here. On this channel, I talk about my life living with Vascular Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome or VEDS, and I also share pieces of my podcast, Staying Connected, where I talk to people with VEDS and Marfan syndrome and Loeys-Dietz syndrome and similar vascular and aortic connective tissue conditions. So welcome, I'm so glad you're here, and if you're not new here, thank you for coming back. It's really great to have you here. I'm so passionate about building a community and making sure that people with these conditions don't need to go through this alone. So thanks for coming back. In this video, I'm going to talk about how to get tested for VEDS. And I think this probably applies to similar conditions like Marfan and Loeys-Dietz as well. This topic is really important to me because the struggles I went through to get tested for VEDS. Back in 2014, I saw a geneticist who unfortunately was not very familiar with vascular EDS, and I didn't know much about it at all. I had been referred because of a skin thing called elastosis perforans serpiginosa. That geneticist spent a lot of time with me, but because I have no family history, and I don't think that they were super familiar with the vascular type of EDS, they told me that I didn't meet the criteria for any form of EDS, especially not the vascular type, and I never got a genetic test. This ultimately was the challenge then in figuring out why I had this crazy pain in 2016, which turned out to be a carotid artery dissection and pseudoaneurysm, diagnosed about a year and a half later after the onset of that pain. I think if I had gotten the VEDS diagnosis, I probably would have realized that the pain I had was a dissection, or at least I would have known to advocate for myself to get the right kind of scan in an emergency room or from my PCP or I just did not have the right care set up for me with this condition, and I didn't know that I had it. To make it even more complicated, in 2017, when I figured out that I had this and that somebody had missed it, it was really hard to get somebody to genetically test me. There was a 1.5 year waiting list to see the geneticist. There were several doctors and professionals that told me like, oh, you're not gonna see the geneticist, they only see people with the vascular type. And I'm like, I have the vascular type. Like, I was so distraught and desperate and so anxious at this period of my life. And I don't think that anybody should really have to go through that amount of anxiety. It's enough anxiety thinking that you might have something like VEDS. I think it's a really big problem when people are when you think that you have something and you can't get somebody to just test you for it. And in my mind in 2017, I thought, wow, this must be a really complicated test. Nobody will order it. Nobody felt comfortable taking a blood test and sending it to the lab that was comfortable in testing for it. It was just a nightmare. And I don't think anybody should have to go through that. When I finally got tested for VEDS, it was the geneticist that I had seen back in 2014 that told me I didn't meet the criteria for it. I ended up having to call that doctor and say, please check my file. I think you missed something. I'm pretty sure I have VEDS. I have this insane neck pain that's been going on for a year. I don't know why, but nobody will help me. And I'm at my last option here. And I was living across the country from where I had seen that geneticist. That should not be the experience. And I found out when I got that test that it was not a complicated blood draw or anything. They sent me a saliva kit in the mail. Somebody I know calls it a spit kit, and I think that's adorable. So I'm gonna call it a spit kit from now on. But they send you a tube, and you spit in it and you send it back, and they send it off to a genetics lab that does the appropriate test to test for a condition like VEDS or Marfan or Loeys-Dietz or genetically confirmed cases of EDS as well. There's 13, 14 types of EDS, and all but one of them have a known genetic cause. So those should show up positive on a genetic test as well if they're testing for that condition. I wish that back in 2017, somebody had done a video on how to get tested for this because I was totally exhausted and couldn't figure it out. First, if you can see a geneticist, see a geneticist. I think that's the most important thing. That's going to be the best person to order the test, a geneticist that works with a genetic counselor, and they can talk you through the whole process. I think that's really important. There's a list of institutions familiar with conditions like VEDS and Marfan and Loeys-Dietz on the Marfan Foundation's website and on the VEDS Movement's website. I'm going to put that in the description of this video, so go check that out if you need to find it. That's, I think, step one. Try to get in to see somebody like that. Sometimes it's a cardiologist, sometimes it's a geneticist that works with a cardiologist at one of these Marfan aortic clinics. I think that would be a great place to start. If you can't get in there, there are other options. There are things called genetic screening tests, and I think that that's really what Color does. I've done another video about Color. There's an option from Quest Diagnostics for a genetic screening test. These are not diagnostic tests though. Invitae has a self-order option for genetic testing. It's not really self-order, but basically it's like a self-request. You request that you have a telemedicine appointment with somebody who can order the test. That's how it works. They have a partnership with Genome Medical that does these tests, and I think it's only a couple $100. It depends on your insurance, but they have out-of-pocket pay options that are not exorbitant either. I think that's a great second option if you can't get it. There's another option too, run by an organization called Fight VEDS. Very, very similar. You go on their website, you fill out a form, you tell them, a little bit about your history and what you want, and they will work to get you a telehealth appointment with a geneticist or a genetic counselor who can then order the test, and it's a diagnostic test to test for one of these conditions. I think that's all you really need to do, honestly. Find a geneticist who's familiar with connective tissue conditions and try to see them. Find a cardiologist or geneticist on the list of institutions at marfan.org or the vedsmovement.org and try to get in to see one of those if they're close enough to you and you have the ability to do that and they're accepting new patients. Or go on to fightveds.org and request this telemedicine appointment to get a test ordered for you. They will order the most appropriate test, and then you don't have to figure it out. That same option, similar option, is available through Invitae, and I've put that in the description of this video as well. I really, really hope this helps. I remember being so anxious when I couldn't get a test, and I really, really knew that I had this condition. Ultimately, it was the reason why my carotid artery dissection was finally diagnosed. Please know that if you come back positive for this diagnosis or a similar one to it, there is a growing community of people out here for you to connect with, and you don't have to go through this alone. There's a community. Hopefully you don't come back positive, but if you do, you are not alone. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you soon.